All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Free GMAT Prep Hour. August 19th, 2025. My name is Ryan Jacobs, and I am a teacher with Manhattan Prep. I'm going to wait just a minute or two. We're a little early, a little before the hour. I know we have some attendees on the list who haven't yet joined. So I'll wait around for them. And in the meantime, let me know if you can hear me okay. It looks good from my end, but you never know. And by the way, I'm really excited for today's session. Hopefully, by the end of today, we will have written an actual GMAT problem, maybe even two. We'll see how it goes. I think that might be overly optimistic, but that's the idea. So, looks like we've hit the hour. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Ryan Jacobs. I'm a teacher with Manhattan Prep. Today is August 19th, and this is the free GMAT Prep Hour. And before we get started, I want to draw your attention to a few other free resources that Manhattan Prep offers. One is the starter kit. So if you're just starting out with the GMAT, you can learn all the stuff you need to know just to get started. And you can use this search term to go find that. We also offer courses, GMAT courses and GRE courses, by the way. And the nice thing about those courses is that the first session is a trial session. You can take it for free. So if you want to, see some different teacher styles before you commit to a full course, that's a great way to do it. And even if you just want to come and learn a little something about the GMAT, the first session is real work. And you'll learn a lot about the GMAT even just during that trial session. So Manhattan Prep GMAT Complete course is what you want for that. And then finally, Manhattan Prep offers a free Foundations of GMAT Math workshop. So if you are in the situation where it's been a while since you did that kind of math, like algebra and exponent rules and quadratics, all the stuff you need to know for the GMAT. Maybe you've been out of college for a while and you're a little rusty on your math skills. This is a great way to get back into it. And again, it's free. So lots of options for you out there. Please search around, take advantage. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with today. The topic of today is let's write a GMAT question. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's do it. And I guess the question is, why would you be interested in this as a GMAT student? Well, I can tell you from my perspective as a teacher, I have to write GMAT questions from time to time as part of my job. Over the years I've been teaching the GMAT, sometimes the test gets updated or whatever, and it's something I'm asked to do. And I've learned a lot from that perspective about how to answer questions on the real GMAT, what some of the common pitfalls are, what some of the trap answers might look like, and what the test can and can't test you on. So hopefully some of this will rub off on you as well. And it's hard to pin down exactly, what you learned from it. But hopefully, over the course of seeing this process, you'll get something out of today. So with that in mind, I want to give you a little bit of introduction to the perspective on writing test questions. And I'm going to start with two things that are taken specifically from the GMAC, the test writers. They say two things. Number one, answering quant questions correctly relies on logic and analytical skills, not the underlying math skills. And this is one of the things that makes the GMAT really different from the SAT. The SAT often just, tests your math. Do you know it or do you not? But the GMAT will have some sort of logical or problem-solving element added to just the fundamental math. So you do need to know some basic math, but it's not really about that. It's about your problem solving. And then we might also write a verbal question today. And just for the sake of simplicity, I've selected critical reasoning as our topic for today if we have some time. And here's what they say about critical reasoning. Again, directly from the GMAC. They say critical reasoning questions measure your ability to make arguments, evaluate arguments, and formulate or evaluate a plan of action. So notice that all of this is coming directly from your brain, right? Can you make the argument yourself? Can you evaluate the argument yourself? You are the one doing the work. You're not relying on what's on the screen. And by the way, critical reasoning, according to the GMAT, should be usually about 100 words or less. So we have a word limit to constrain ourselves to as well. Now, some considerations from my perspective as a teacher. When I write GMAT questions for work, they get edited by other teachers, so I'm always having different eyes on the project. We don't have time to do that today, so sorry. The questions we come up with might be a little rough around the edges, but that's okay. And also, we won't test them on anybody. So normally when I write a question, I like to give it to some trial students. And since you're here with me today, you can be our guinea pig. But normally we test it on a lot of people. And again, we don't have total time to do that. What we will do, though, is follow some of the guidelines that I always follow. So I'm going to try to make the question GMAT-like, as GMAT-like as I can. We want the test item to differentiate high scores from low scores. So a hard question can't just be hard. It has to be hard for some people, but easier for others, depending on their skill level and their problem-solving ability. So it's kind of hard sometimes to write something that differentiates, right? Anyone can write a super hard question or a super easy question. It's that middle ground that is sometimes hard to find. So we'll try to do that. Things on the GMAT should in general be true in the real world, and sometimes scientific advancements are such that they have to remove items from the test, and they do not like to do that, right? So we have to keep things real world true. But we're trying to avoid controversial topics because we don't want to trigger anybody as they're taking the test. That would be unfair to certain test takers, and that would create a really bad test item. So, we're going to keep it pretty mellow. And then it should go without saying, but we can't plagiarize. So I can't just, take something directly from another source and put it in a GMAT problem. We have to be the ones coming up with it ourselves. So with that in mind, let's get started. I took the liberty before this session of just throwing a random number generator, having it output some random numbers for me. And it generated a few topics that it all put together into certain problems. So I don't know if these are any good. And those of you who are listening online, you can tell me if you have a preference for which problem I should write. But I'm just going to go through these 4 options it gave me, and I'll give you my quick thoughts. So let's go one by one, and you can type in the chat if you have some opinions on this too. And I haven't looked at these yet, so let's take a look. So perfect cubes, that would be like 1 and then 2 cubes is 8 and then 3 cubes is 27. Have we memorized those? So maybe we could write a problem that tests that, along with a percent increase decrease problem, along with an inequalities problem. I can see how perfect cubes and inequalities might be related, especially on a data sufficiency question too, although I kind of want to do quant today. So that might be a good one to look at. Percent increase decrease, by the way, is something that the GMAT tests really commonly. And a lot of people have trouble with it because they've only studied basic percents, right? Like percent of X. But what about percent greater than X or percent less than X? That can be really good grounds for creating a GMAT problem. This one, powers of 3, so that's like 3, 9, 27, 81, and 243. So can you recognize those on site? Along with an overlapping sets question, I'm not sure how we might do that, but scientific notation we could do. So like we could do something like 0.0009 and 0.027, and we could put those in the same problem. So you'd have to rewrite that in scientific notation. And maybe instead of overlapping sets, we could do like a greatest common factor or something there. Maybe like of these 2 numbers or some combination of those sorts of numbers. So that could be actually a good problem to write. This one, problem 3, rules of divisibility. So for example, do you know whether the number 370 is divisible by 4? Just by looking at it. Well, the trick is to just look at the 70. Is that divisible by 4? No, it is not. So neither is 370. And all these numbers have different rules. So we could include that in a problem. And then weighted averages and absolute value. I'm not sure how those would combine with rules of divisibility, but we could probably find a way to do maybe one or the other. I think absolute value is probably the easier choice there, but we could think about it. And then we could do a times tables problem that involves some combinatorics and some simultaneous equations at the same time. Okay, so this actually looks like the easiest for me to write. I love combinatorics, even though it isn't tested quite as commonly as some other things on GMAT. And then simultaneous equations. I don't know how I would mix that in, but I could probably find a way. So unless there are any objections, I think I'm going to run with this one. And let's write a GMAT problem. So at this point, I'm going to just pause a little and mention you can feel free to influence me in the chat. So if you don't like the direction I'm going, feel free to suggest something else. Feel free to correct me if I make a mistake, which I might as I write these. But otherwise, let's get started. So times tables, combinatorics, and simultaneous equations. Write that down. Tables, combinatorics, simultaneous equations. So let's start with the combinatorics aspect of it. I think I would like to make a choice problem. So let's say something like there's a pool of about 11 candidates. And we have to choose two. And let's say, well, we have to have something else happen. And I'll just start here, by the way, and mention, if you haven't done a lot of combinatorics on GMAT, this is written as 11 choose 2 sometimes. But the number of ways you can do that is 11 factorial over 2 factorial, 9 factorial. Okay, so that's one of the base skills we're testing. How many ways are there to choose 2 from 11? And the answer would be 11 times 10 over 2 times 1, right, when you cancel out the 9 factorial. So that's 11 times 5, that's 55. And here's where my times tables are coming in, by the way. That's why I chose 11 as a number, because I thought that might be a nice number to pick. Okay. So now how can we throw some simultaneous equations in there? Maybe X represents the number of ways we can do this. And now I need to include X in some equation somehow. So let's say it's got to be pretty simple, right? Because if X is 55, I don't want to do too much math there. So what can we do here? You know what? I might scrap the simultaneous equations part, and I might make a second combinatorics thing. So let's say we need to do that, and we need to choose a president. For this club. So let's say this is the city council. And we also need to choose president. So we have 3 candidates. And we need to choose one. So I'll say from 3 candidates. So how many ways are there to do that? Well, it would be 55 times 3. But that seems a little simple for a GMAT question because this seems like pure math, right? It's just 11 choose 2 times 3, basic fundamental counting principle. So I'm just trying to think, how can I add a problem solving element? And I have an idea here. I think I know where I want to go with this. Let's say that one of the candidates is in both groups. So now it's okay. Now it's an overlapping sets question. I'm glad I'm putting in a different element. So instead of simultaneous equations, I'm going to put some sort of overlap. And maybe let's say that there are 3 candidates, but one is in the other pool, the city council. Okay, great. So I'm going to now clear all this work. I think I know where I'm going with this. I'm going to write it in a different way. We have person A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K. 11 people. And then we have K, L, M. So 3 people. And these are all candidates for city council. These 3 are candidates for president. And we need to choose 2 city council members and 1 president. How many ways to do that are there? So this would be the basic question. And, we'd have to write it a little more nicely. But note that the issue here is that the candidate for city council K is the same as the candidate for president here. And so they can't be both, right? So I'm going to write note that K can't be both on city council and be the president. Those have to be 2 different. So now, here's how I would actually solve that. I would say, well, there are 11 factorial over 2 factorial, 9 factorial ways to choose these candidates for city council. And then there are 3 ways to choose a candidate for president. However, I need to subtract from that the number of people who are the number of options where K is both. So assume that I've chosen candidate K for president. How many ways would K be included in this group? Well, I think that would just be 10, right? Because assuming that I choose K, there would be 10 other people I could choose. So it could be KA, KB, KC, etc. Those are the 10 options. So the answer is going to be 55 times 3 minus 10. That would be the correct answer. So doing the math, let's see. That's 165 minus 10. That gets me 155. And we're done. All right, so that makes 1 correct answer. But now we need to choose the wrong answers. So I'm going to pause for a minute and I'll let you think. What are some of the ways people could mess this up? I'm going to think about the same thing. We need to create trap answers for people who miss parts of the problem. Feel free to use the chat feature as well if you want. So I think one way people could mess this up is they could forget um, the 9 factorial. Although that number would be way too big to be a trap answer, so I don't think I'm going to put that there. I think people who do that, I'll give them a chance. I suppose people could also forget the 2 factorial. I think that's more likely. So I'm going to create a trap answer for that. If you forget the 2 factorial, you're going to get 11 times 10 times 3. So that would be 330 minus 10. And that would be 320. Although people who forget that are probably going to say maybe 30 over here. I don't know. Yeah, so maybe 300. Let's make that one of the trap answers. That's kind of a nice trap too, because it's nice and round. I think people gravitate towards 300 as an incorrect answer. Maybe I'll put the other one in. Maybe we'll include 320. Right, for people who just forget the 2 factorial, but then they do the minus 10 correctly. I also think that people are going to forget to do the minus 10. So they'll just say, oh, the answer is this. And they'll forget this constraint that you can't have k in both groups. So people who forget the minus 10 will pick 165 when the correct answer is actually 155. And then probably there's some people who will do just 11 times 3, maybe minus 10. So, people who see that and just say, or actually they might do minus 1 because they'll say k is the overlap. So maybe we'll have 32 as one of the incorrect answers, right? 11 times 3 minus 1. If people are rushing, I think that's sometimes something they would do. So notice that when I'm planning these incorrect answers, I am planning things that people might actually conceivably do. I'm planning trap answers, and that's because I want the people who aren't doing the problem correctly to get it wrong. I want to set traps for them so that I really do a good job of differentiating the people who know how to do the problem and read the whole problem and figure out how to adjust by using this minus 10, rather than just the people who are winging it. Another thing I like about these answer choices, by the way, is it feels very GMAT-like because there's sort of a spread, right? This answer is very low. These 2 answers are sort of close together, and these 2 answers are sort of close together. And so if you're sort of ballparking it, if you have a pretty good sense of how many of these committees there could be, you might actually get rewarded just by having that number sense. And I think I want to pause on that point because for all you GMAT students out there who are currently in the throes of studying, that's something to really think about is how can I use my answer choices, right? Every once in a while, I'll get a student in my class who's like really good at just not picking up his or her pencil before checking all 5 answer choices. And they're like always just making an estimate. And I see those students get high scores a lot of the time because when they get to the test on the problems that they don't know how to do, they're so used to ballparking it that they actually steal a lot of points, even on problems that are really hard. They kind of get them half of them right anyway, and that can really make a difference in your score if you're pretty good at ballparking. So when I write problems, I try to reward that sort of thinking, since I think the GMAT rewards that sort of thinking quite a bit. Okay, so our final step is going to be to write this problem in an actually nice way. So I'm going to try to get rid of some of the work that I've done. And let's try to make this language GMAT-like. There are let's say a government, a school, a student government is to be selected at random. well, I won't say everyone. The student government is to be selected. There are 11 students running for council. And 2 will be elected. I'll use the word elected instead. There are 3 students running for president, and 1 will be elected. And I should specify, maybe I should put that first. Student government is to be elected. Student government, including 2 council members and 1 president. There are 11 students running for council and 3 students running for with 1 student running for both council and for president. If no student can serve as both are both as president and on the council, how many such governments are possible? And we have these 5 answer choices. All right, so that's very GMAT-like. I think we're done. The only thing I have to add here is I want to highlight the care that I've given to the language here. There are 11 students running for council and 3 students running for president, with 1 student running for both council and president. That way I phrased it, see how at the very end of that sentence I said, with 1 student running for both council and for president? That's the kind of thing that people fail to read a lot, right? When you're kind of focused on your GMAT work, you're in the middle of the test, you're trying to figure everything out. That's the kind of thing that you might sort of glance at, but not really register, especially because it's the hardest thing to deal with. And so I think a lot of times, the lesson we're learning here is if you're taking the GMAT and you see something like this and you don't know how to deal with it, maybe try to be aware that, oh, that's the part I have to problem solve. Because the rest of the problem is sort of stock, it's based on a formula, it's based on that combinatorics formula that we saw earlier. But this is the part that's a little weird, right? That's the part that I haven't really dealt with before. And the GMAT is testing your ability to problem solve that little weird constraint, right? That little part that you haven't seen before. And the mistake I see a lot of students make is they just ignore the part that they don't like because the rest of the problem is formulaic. So they treat it as a formulaic problem without ever really addressing that little bit at the end of the sentence that's buried in the middle. So the GMAT loves to hide little things at the end of a sentence like that. Very typical GMAT. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with this one. I think it probably could use a little editing. The language is a little maybe unclear. I think I could make it more clear with some editing, but I think it's for our purposes, it's good enough for now. All right, cool. So let's go on. We got time now to write a verbal question. And again, I did a little pre-work before the session. I'll show you what I did. I admit it, I used AI tools. But I am not going to get AI to write the prompt for me. I'm not that guy. Come on. I'm a professional here. But I wanted to show you the prompt that I used in case, this kind of brainstorming is helpful for you. I love to use AI for brainstorming purposes. And so I asked it to just give me 20 flawed arguments from real life, essentially. I asked it to be non-controversial, to be pretty short, and have some sort of flaw. And I just picked my favorite, or a few of my favorites. I want to show those to you right now. And again, if you have preferences about which one you want to dig into a little bit, you can let me know in chat as we go. But here are some of my favorites. So one was it spit out the Zoom fatigue technology argument. So premise is video calls became exhausting during remote work periods. Yeah, we all remember COVID. And in-person meetings never caused similar mental fatigue. I don't know that that's true, but I'll take it as a premise. And we conclude that video conferencing technology is inherently harmful to productivity. So yeah, I mean, that's a flawed argument because in-person meetings can be equally draining, although I think that goes against the premise. So I don't love that as a flaw. The fatigue may stem from meeting frequency rather than the medium itself. That could be a potential issue. And I think I could write a problem based on this. So this idea that, well, hey, wait a second. What if video calls also allow us to schedule more meetings during the day because we don't have to commute and we can schedule them back to back, right? We can just sit at our computer. We don't have to walk from one place to a different place. So it's actually not the video call, the technology that's inherently harmful. It's actually the fact that we're doing more meetings and that video calls allow us to do more meetings. That would be an interesting one to write. But let's see what else they gave me. I got 5 of them. Here's another one, TikTok attention span argument. So the premise is TikTok videos are short. Premise 2, young people these days spend hours watching these short videos. They're always on their TikTok. I already don't like this because it seems rude to the younger generation. I feel like that's mean and I don't want to do that. But let's see if we can get something out of it. So we conclude that TikTok has permanently shortened human attention spans. Well, yeah, clearly it's not just TikTok. There are other factors that could be happening. It also could be context dependent. So let's see what the flaw says. Assumes correlation equals causation. Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, okay, so kind of what I said. Format preference doesn't necessarily instigate cognitive changes. In other words, they might just have short attention spans when they're watching TikTok, but then they get to a classroom and they're fine. Again, I don't love that because it feels rude. So I like the first one better. Let's go on. Contactless payment adoption argument. Okay, so premise contactless payments, that's when you take your credit card and you just tap it, right? Instead of swiping it or instead of using cash. Increased during the pandemic. There's a lot of pandemic stuff. Health concerns drove this adoption, so cash will be completely eliminated. Well, okay, so this is a nice example of something the GMAT tests. Is a conclusion that's too extreme. Right? A better conclusion is that cash will become less popular within 5 years. But to say it will be completely eliminated is a bridge too far. And so, you know, there's a gap to that conclusion. And that talks about the scope of the conclusion. The issue I have with this one, though, is that I think it's a little too obvious. I think most test takers would be like completely eliminated. That's nuts, right? We all know that cash is going to continue to exist. And so it's so easy to poke holes in this argument that I don't think it's going to be enough of a challenge. So, yeah, I mean, the flaws, again, are kind of things that we knew already. So I don't love this one for that reason. I think it would be difficult to write a difficult enough question based on this. Anyway, so I like the first one there. And then I want to show you a different prompt that I thought got me good results as well. I changed it slightly where I was like, I don't really want bad arguments. I just want things on which we disagree. And I gave it some constraints. One of them, this maybe is not strictly GMAT related, but I want to highlight that I wanted some stuff from the humanities, not just from STEM. I've noticed that AI tools have a really STEM bias, which I don't love. Being a humanities major, and also having, because the GMAT tests a lot of humanities topics like social science, history, that kind of. So, anyway, and this is what it gave me. I'll show you two of my favorites. One was a relationship between microbiome and mental health. So there's this theory out there that the stuff that lives in your stomach, all those bugs floating around from the yogurt that you're eating or whatever, can have an impact on your mental health. And some people believe that it's causal. In other words, the makeup of your stomach, your gut microbiome, they call it, actually influences your mental health. Whereas other people think that it's just a correlation. So it's not, it's maybe going in the other direction, or there's some outside influence. So, and they even mentioned some of those possibilities, like diet is influencing both, stress is influencing both. So if you get stressed out, your mental health suffers, but also some of the things in your gut die. And I actually liked this prompt quite a bit because I got some results. I got some results from AI that gave me some evidence for both. So what would strengthen the causal relationship? Well, if we knew that there were studies showing that when we changed the microbiome, in other words, when we got in there and put stuff in there, we saw an impact on mental health. But it would weaken if that failed, or if we found some confounding factors. So I assume that's the same as strengthening evidence B. So see what they say for weakening B. Yeah, okay, kind of the same stuff. So how could I make a problem out of that? Well, maybe if I had something like, what's a microbiome intervention? We gave people a bunch of yogurt and this happens to their mental health. I think I actually could write a good problem with this, because I don't think people would really immediately understand that there's a difference between correlation causation. I think a lot of people would just accept that, oh yeah, it's clearly the gut that's causing the mental health. Oh, speaking of which, I just thought of another direction we could go with this problem that's maybe more GMAT-like. I bet what the GMAT would say is we could weaken the people that believe A by saying people struggling with mental health tend not to eat as much fermented food, which causes their gut microbiome to suffer. And those words aren't great, but I think you get the idea. Here's what I'm realizing, though, talking about this. I actually don't love this problem, because I think the mental health aspect of it, especially like the judgment, like the good mental health and poor mental health, I don't love that. I think it might be needlessly aggressive to test takers, especially people struggling with those sorts of issues. So I think I would have to throw that out, even though it's maybe a good example for the GMAT. And I wonder if we could change mental health just to physical health. I think that's probably a way to make it less judgmental. The only thing there is I'd have to make sure that's actually true. I'd have to make sure that there's some sort of evidence linking gut health to physical health. Okay, let's look at the other one. Language acquisition in children. Okay, so what do we disagree on here? Some people believe that children possess an innate language acquisition device. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so like it's hardwired. So like you're born with your brain like having some grammar hardwired in, versus other people think that language emerges through general cognitive abilities and social interaction. Oh, that's really interesting. I don't even know what I think about this. You guys have an opinion? Do we think that like you're born just with the basics of language encoded into your brain? Or are you born a blank slate and you only learn language because everyone else is doing language? Who knows? So now I'm really curious, what's the evidence for each? Okay, so the evidence that's hardwired might be cross-linguistic universals. Okay, yeah, so every language having some sort of feature. Um, critical period effects, specific language impairments that spare other cognition. Oh, anyway, what would that be though? Like, why would that be evidence that it's hardwired? What kind of language impairment could we have where the rest of our brain is functioning normally? Yeah, I wonder if there are people who have like certain speech patterns where it's clear that something has gone wrong in their brain, not something that's gone wrong in their like talking to people all around them. That's super interesting. Yeah, okay. That would be hard to write a question on. Though. I think the cross-linguistic universals, I think, would be easier. Anyway, what would weaken that? Cultural variation, language structure. Um, gradual rather than sudden acquisition. Yeah, okay. So like this first one, if all the languages in the world are really different from each other, that would weaken this idea that it's hardwired. Um, oh, artificial language. This is such an AI thing. So artificial languages, I think they're talking about languages that are like constructed by a computer, or something like that, where it's like, not a person language. So if you can learn that as an adult, then maybe that weakens the idea that human language rules are hardwired into our brain. I don't know. I don't even know if I am understanding that correctly. But whatever, let's go on to B. Statistical learning demonstrations, correlation between input frequency and acquisition order. Successful computational models without built-in grammar. That's interesting. Yeah, so like, is it possible to have a language that doesn't have any of these grammar rules? I don't know if that would make a great, yeah, I don't know if that would make a great problem. So what would weaken the idea that that we just learn it all from other people? Oh, rapid acquisition despite noisy input. That's really interesting. So like, what if we're able to understand a language, even though a bunch of people are speaking different languages around us. So like I can learn English, even though my environment is full of Spanish and Swedish and Tagalog and Mandarin, right? I'm still able to learn English rapidly, despite all this other evidence coming in. That would indicate that my brain's kind of hardwired for it, right? Because my brain can understand those patterns. So maybe there's a problem. All right, so I'll wait a minute for opinions. See if you guys have a preference. What I should write about. And in the absence of too much strong opinion, I think I'm going to go with this last one. Actually, no, the only reason I'm not going to do that, I think it would get over 100 words. This is a little too complex. I think I'm going to go back to the first one, Zoom fatigue technology argument. Also, because we're on Zoom right now. Another thing I should mention, clearly we can't actually mention Zoom by name in writing the problem, so we're going to have to just say video call technology. Zoom is great. We love them. They've changed our lives for the better. And let's see. The conclusion that video conferencing technology is inherently harmful to productivity. That's actually a good conclusion as is. So let's say over the past 5 years, video calls have become a popular way for business people to communicate. And they'll probably give a definition of video calls on the GMAT because terms like that are jargony, they really want to make it fair to everybody. So they want you to know what we're talking about. So video calls, i.e. where users talk face to face over the internet. And I'll make this a simpler sentence as well. I'll just say are becoming. Because over the past 5 years isn't really evergreen. But I think this will continue to be true. Or let's say have become. That's even better. And let's say, however, recent studies, or let's say polls, because studies makes it sound too conclusive. Recent polls have shown that many business people have indicated that they are exhausted by video calls. Let's say too exhausted by video calls to do the other work, to do their other work effectively. Before the advent, or let's say the popularization, I'll use the same word that I used before. Before the popularization of video calls, business people did not indicate the same exhaustion from in-person. Therefore, video conferencing. I've used video calls throughout, actually. I'll say video calling technology is inherently harmful to productivity. And I gotta say, I almost never like the way AI spits out stuff, but this is pretty darn good. So good job, AI model. I am stealing that. I don't think that's plagiarism, so I think we're good to go. Okay. So now what kind of question is this going to be? I think we've got a decent I think, should we make a weaken the argument? Well, let's think about the flaw. The issue, oh yeah, the issue we said here was going to be that video calls have also made it popular to meet more frequently. So I should actually specify the conclusion a little more specifically then. I should say video calling I'll say video calls should be, I'll say therefore, business managers should replace, should consider mandating that a certain percentage of meetings take place in person rather than over. Okay, so what would weaken this argument? Which of the following would cast the most doubt on the recommendation being given to business managers? And note, by the way, this is a pretty GMAT-like thing to do, where they point to a specific part of this argument. And actually, so here's a tip for you GMAT test takers out there. Probably, if they do that, they're going to get rid of the therefore. They're going to make it a little less obvious what the conclusion is. And they're going to point you to that being the conclusion using the actual question. So if you ever see a question like this that isn't just like a weaken the argument, it's a weaken something specifically, I'll say the recommendation being given to business managers, right, where they're pointing you right there, you can use that to your advantage. You can be like, oh, that's what the conclusion is, or that's what I'm going to focus on. So you'll see complex questions like that. And let's write the correct answer choice first. Let's make it answer choice E. Just for no reason. It would cast doubt if I knew that video calls have allowed for more meetings. I'm actually not going to say that first. I'm going to say video calls do not require business people to travel to different locations. And so they can, so more video calls can be scheduled during the day. Then how do I say this? Allowing more allowing more meeting time. Now, I'll say that right up front. Video calls. Business people who use video calls can spend more time in meetings on a given day than those who use in-person meetings, than those who meet in person. Since video calls don't require travel. All right, so that's going to be the correct answer. Because it's going to call into question that, oh, we should mandate meetings taking place in person. Let me just make sure that. So business managers should consider I don't like the way I've rewritten the conclusion. I kind of like the way they said it. So therefore, video conferencing, video call technology. I know what we'll say. Technology tires people. Out faster. I'll say video calls tire people out faster than do in-person meetings. And then, of course, I have to change the question. So I'll just say on the conclusion. There we go. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. So again, fairly typical of the GMAT. We have premise. Video calls have become popular. Oh, that's just background. The premise is that polls have shown business people are too exhausted by video calls to do work effectively. And before there were video calls, they didn't get exhausted from in-person meetings. And therefore, video calls are tiring people out. That seems like a reasonable argument. That's one of the reasons I like it, and it feels very GMAT-like, is, oh, yeah, this is really reasonable. That makes sense, right? Video calls are a problem. You got to get rid of them. So what could possibly cast doubt on that? And then you get the correct answer, which is, oh, it's actually the video calls are are allowing people to spend more time in meetings. So it's not the video calls itself, it's the fact that we're doing more of them. And maybe I think to make that more clearly the correct answer, we could say, let's write another maybe correct answer that I might like better, which is something like, business people who spend the same amount of total time business people who use video calls and those who meet only in person report the same amount of fatigue when they spend the same amount of total time per day in meetings. This might be more clearly the correct answer. So here's an example, actually. These are both correct. But here's an example of, I think this would be a harder question, right? And this would be an easier question because it's more clear how this relates to the conclusion directive. So finally, we would have to write some wrong answers here. I think I won't do this because we're limited time at this point. I tried to get 2 problems in, but we didn't quite get there. That's okay. We got 1 full quant problem that I'm pretty happy with. But I will just say as my final thought here, for weaken the argument questions, a lot of the wrong answers are going to strengthen the argument instead. So I would definitely write 1 or 2 answers that indicate that yes, video calls do tire people out. I'll give you one right now. Answer choice C. Video calls are more tiring because they cause eye strain, leading to fatigue. That would be the wrong answer. And it would be a very typical GMAT wrong answer because it is related to the argument, right? But it strengthens rather than weakens. Okay. So finally, thank you guys so much for coming. This has been really fun, actually, and hopefully you've gotten some insight into not only my work, but also the GMAT itself. And hopefully by seeing this test from a different perspective, you've gained some insight as to not only how to spot the right answer, but how to think about the wrong answers, right? How to think about how they're going to trap you. Well, maybe you missed a word, or maybe you misread the question as a strengthen rather than a weaken, or you were just looking for something that on the surface seemed related. So when you really think about what the test writers are doing, remember, they're testing your logic ability, your problem solving ability, rather than just your math skills or your reading skills. And that's really the key to studying for the GMAT. Fantastic. Good luck to everybody studying out there. And I'll see you next time I do one of these free GMAT prep hours. Don't forget to check out our free resources. Check out a first session of the class. Check out our GMAT starter kit and check out Manhattan Prep Foundations Math. See you later.